Alright, let's look at the Texas drought, implementing a solution based on the updated drought monitor. As far as the California drought, well, California has had its chances and definitely have been in touch with a lot of their leaders. They're not responding. Neither are their journalists. So although they love to write about all the problems, as soon as there's a solution, they don't want to write about the solution. I think that's very interesting. But I'm still reaching out, and I hit up Drought Monitor to see if they work with any decision maker in California. Meanwhile, let's get to Texas. Texans are smarter and way superior. Okay, first of all, discussion of any QSIP or security is for discussion purposes. Do not buy any security mentioned in this playlist unless you performed your due diligence. Note that I purchased shares of Lehman Brothers 3 days before it collapsed, so anyone following me into a trade is taking excessive risk and may lose significant financial value. In addition, at the time of this video, I may or may not own shares of the company mentioned and may or may not have kept those shares depending on what circumstances changed. So, Texas drought. This is the latest drought monitor of Texas, and you can see some areas that are pretty bad. West Texas is, it looks better than it did, but it's still pretty bad. So the areas that I've drawn here in green in my little simple image, all I did was I highlighted areas that, these are the two what I call crisis points. You have this area of Texas, West Texas, and you have this kind of what they call the panhandle of Texas here. And the problem with these areas is, first of all, they're away from the ocean, and even though I know people want to talk about conservation all the time, that's not really, that's what Californians do, and that's why they're deluded. Conservation isn't a strategy, it's not an approach, it's not going to work in the long run, right? What I mean by that is if a drought lasts 100 years, well, you can conserve all you want. It's like being unemployed for 10 years. You can save all the money you can and be as frugal as you want, but sooner or later you're going to have to bring in some income. That's just all there is to it. It's the same thing with North Texas here. As you can see, there's some water problems here. So these would be where we would either need like a pipeline. So if we have a desalination solution, a pipeline going here, or we can use the existing river infrastructure to flush water down there. Okay, this would also be the reason why, for instance, Americans don't know this, but their beef prices are more expensive is because of the drought in Texas, right? See, everybody gets poorer when you don't solve a drought. That's what's going to happen in California before it's over with. So people's food prices will triple, and then all of a sudden they'll start caring. So two areas of concern, I would say, due to water transportation are West Texas and North Texas. I said, let's avoid the delusion of Californians betting on the fact that conservation is going to work. It's actually a high-risk approach because droughts can last for hundreds of years. If you don't believe me, look at it. I mean, the Sahara Desert wasn't always a desert. It's growing, which means at one time it was smaller. So what happened? It's a simple process called desertification, right? It's not really a simple process, but this thing. I mean, droughts can last a long time. But we've seen, like with Dubai, what Dubai really is they implemented desalination, and what happened? They transformed the city, right? Or transformed the area, right? New sources of water must be implemented, like desalination. That's a must, period. Okay, we don't know how long this drought will last. We've been in a drought for a while. We don't know how long it's going to last. And 1 year of a good amount of water is not 10 years of a good amount of water, okay? So let's face it, if we've been in, let's say, 20 years of a lot of water, okay, well, then we can turn these off, right? We can be like, oh, well, we have them when we need them, but we can go ahead and turn them off, right? You don't have to keep everything on if you don't need it, right? And we learned in the 80s with oil, if our economy is too dependent, or if we're too dependent on one approach, our whole state's in trouble. Texas, for those of you who don't know, and I know there's probably a few young Texans that may watch this, so Texas was way too dependent on oil. Then the 80s came along, and there was a 70s and 80s oil crisis, and bam, we got slammed. Huge unemployment, right? So one of the things we learned was we have to be more diversified, and that's the same thing with our state. We don't want to have just one approach to solving water. So always back up the backup, conservation, desalination. When I say evaluating uses, we may be using water in some ways that maybe we don't need to be using water, right? Maybe something else is better than water to be used. So consider the fact that evaluating uses is always a useful approach as well. And then, of course, I say the water tax to build backups. Okay, eliminate when complete. What I mean by that is Texans like consumption taxes. It's how our state prospers. If we need to build a couple of solutions, like a couple of desalination plants. I think right here and right here would be ideal, these two green spots. Those areas, I should say. You build a couple of desalination solutions with the tax money. Then as soon as they're built and you have them turned on, you go ahead and turn it off, right? Apartments do this all the time. One of the apartments I lived at, they would take the total amount of water usage by the apartment and then equally divide it by all the residents, which I thought was absurd, because that means that people like myself who take really short showers and save as much water as possible, we get taxed, or we fund the bill of the people who take long showers. Okay, it's kind of like that's a form of socialism that punishes everybody equally. My thing is let's reward people who use less water, but let's use some of that tax revenue to go ahead and to build these solutions, and then we don't have to worry, because when let's say we have a drought for cattle farmers, we can turn on these solutions and blam, they have water for their cattle. So these are just some ideas. These are not the final ideas, but especially for students working on the solution, I think these are good starting points and considerations, especially when consider the fact that West Texas and North Texas generally are going to be the problem spots if there are a drought. Central Texas, there are ways to get water in this area just because of the way that the infrastructure is built, but I think that West Texas and North Texas are going to be the areas of concern.